I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA sent 3 bikers to talk to my wife and said we didn't belong. And their excuse? They said to follow their rules, or in 1 week, we're gone. Funny thing is, the only talking we did was them begging me to stop 3 minutes later. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Cole Matthews. I used to teach men how to fight, how to survive. Now, I just want to be left alone. I live on a piece of land my grandfather left me. It's quieter it was. The house sits far back from the road. A long dirt drive cuts through a field of tall grass. One afternoon, the quiet ended. I was in the barn cleaning a piece of old farm equipment. The metal was cool in my hands. I heard the sound first, a low rumble. Elena was in the garden, but I saw her head snap up at the noise. Not a truck, not a tractor. It was the sound of big motorcycles. 3 of them, 2 Harleys and a 3rd bike coming fast. They were coming up my drive, fast. A 3rd bike idled at the gate, blocking the drive. I put the tool down. I walked to the barn door and watched. They were not friendly riders out for a Sunday cruise. They wore black leather. No club patches, just plain, hard leather. They looked like hired muscle, not club riders. Contract work. They stopped in a cloud of dust right in front of my porch. Elena was out there. She was watering her plants. She stood up straight, the hose still in her hand. Her mouth parted for a beat, shock under the palm. Her hand brushed her belly. Out of habit since the loss we hadn't told anyone about. She set the hose down and tapped record on my phone. She didn't look scared. Elena was an EMT for 10 years. She's seen worse than 2 men on bikes. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she held the nozzle like it was a weapon. I started walking toward the house. My feet made no sound on the dry grass. The first man got off his bike. He was big, thick neck, a beard that looked like it was made of wire. He took off his helmet and set it on his seat. He had a mean look in his eyes, the kind of look a man practices in the mirror. He swaggered toward the porch steps. His partner stayed on his bike, engine idling, a lookout. The big one pointed a thick finger at Elena. "You need to leave," he said. His voice was a gravelly bark. "This property is in violation. The HOA wants you out." Elena didn't flinch. She just looked at him. Her eyes are sharp. They see everything. "We're paid up on our dues," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. "And we're not in violation of anything." The man laughed. It was not a nice sound. "Brenda Fletcher says you are? That's all that matters. She sent us to deliver the message. You have 1 week to vacate." He took a step up onto the porch. That was his mistake. I was 10 feet away now. He didn't see me. He was focused on Elena, on being the big, scary man. "Or what?" Elena asked. She took a small step back, giving me room. "We've done this dance before, not with bikers, but with other kinds of trouble. We know the steps. Or we come back and pack your things for you," the man snarled. He reached for her arm. I moved then. It was not a rush. It was just efficient. 3 long strides closed the distance. The man heard me at the last second. He turned. His eyes went wide. He tried to bring his hands up. I was already there. My left hand clamped down on his wrist, the one reaching for Elena. I twisted. There was a sharp crack, bone-breaking. It's a sound you never forget. He screamed, a high, thin sound that didn't match his size. I used his momentum to spin him around. His back hit the porch railing hard. The wood splintered. His friend on the bike killed the engine. He was getting off. He was reaching inside his jacket. Another mistake. On my land, you can defend your home. I shoved the first man off the porch. He landed in a heap in the dirt, clutching his broken wrist. I was down the steps before he hit the ground. The second man had his hand on a gun. He wasn't fast enough. I kicked his knee from the side. It buckled the wrong way. He went down, howling. His leg was bent at an angle it should not be. He fell against his bike, knocking it over. Gas and oil started to leak onto the dry ground. The big one wheezed. "Please, stop. We're done." At the gate, the 3rd rider revved, saw the scene, and fled down the drive. Both were down and disarmed. The porch was secure. The first man was trying to get up. The second was on the ground, trying to crawl away from his wrecked bike. Later, the camera showed 3 minutes exactly. 3 minutes from first step to last fall. Elena was at the top of the steps. She had my phone in her hand. She was recording. Good. Always record. Evidence is better than memory. I walked over to the man with the broken wrist. I knelt down. He flinched. I looked him in the eyes. "Who sent you?" I asked. My voice was quiet. "The HOA," he gasped. Pain was making him sweat. "Brenda Fletcher." "No," I said. "Brenda Fletcher doesn't have the spine to hire men like you. She sends letters. She makes angry phone calls. She doesn't send muscle." "Who paid you?" I pressed my thumb into the nerve cluster on his collarbone. just a little pressure. His whole body seized. He cried out. Okay. Okay, he yelled. He was looking past me at the house, at the fields, at something he thought was worth all this pain. He was scared, but not just of me. He was scared of who sent him. It was Robert, he muttered. The name was a whisper, a mistake. He wasn't supposed to say it. I saw it in his eyes. He knew he had messed up. Robert. Robert Fletcher. Brenda's quiet husband. The soft-spoken man who smiled at the town potlucks. The one who always seemed to be in the background. My hand left his collarbone. I stood up. The pieces were starting to move on the board. This was not about the color of our mailbox or the height of our grass. This was about something else, something Robert wanted. Now I had a name and a reason to start digging. The second man was trying to pull himself up. He was leaving a trail of oil and dirt. I walked over to him. I picked up his wallet from the ground. It had fallen out of his pocket. I took out his driver's license. I looked at his face, then at the picture. I memorized the name, the address. Then I put it back. Tell Robert his message was not received, I said. I looked from him to his friend. And tell him not to send anyone else. I didn't need to raise my voice. They heard me. They understood. This was no longer an HOA dispute. This was a warning. My warning. They had come to my home. They had threatened my wife. They just didn't realize I live here. I turned and walked back to the house. Elena met me on the porch. She had already called the sheriff not because I needed help, but because we do things the right way. For now. For her. For us. She handed me a glass of water. Her hand was steady. Her eyes, though, they were asking a question. What comes next? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The quiet was over. And a man named Robert had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he was dealing with a farmer. He was about to find out he was dealing with something else entirely. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. After the deputies hauled them away, I couldn't stop thinking about what the biker had said. Robert Fletcher. They claimed it was a misunderstanding, a dispute over a property line that got out of hand. The deputy booked them for trespass and assault. One carried an illegal concealed pistol. They never mentioned Robert or Brenda. They were scared. Good. Fear is a useful tool, but their silence was louder than any confession. Robert Fletcher. He was the ghost in our machine, always there, never seen. At town meetings, he'd stand by the wall, hands in his pockets, while his wife, Brenda, stood at the podium. Brenda was the face of the Oak Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association. She was loud, she was obsessive, and she loved the power. She would measure your lawn with a ruler. She would send you violation notices if your garden gnome was an inch too tall. She was a petty tyrant in a polo shirt. The harassment had started small 6 months ago, petty violation notices that we mostly ignored. The farm wasn't technically part of the new Oak Ridge Meadows subdivision, but a legal quirk put our 100 acres under their HOA's authority. A quirk Robert, a former energy company lawyer, had probably helped write. The violations were absurd. Unapproved agricultural vehicle visible from the road. That was my tractor. Excessive foliage height. That was the hayfield. Non-compliant fencing material. That was the split rail fence my grandfather had put up 50 years ago. We ignored most of them. We went to one meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of floor wax and quiet desperation. Brenda stood at the front, pointing at a slideshow. Pictures of our property, our fence, our barn. This is unacceptable, she'd said, her voice shrill. The Matthews are dragging down our property values. They refuse to comply. They think the rules don't apply to them. A few people nodded. Most just stared at their hands. They were afraid of her, afraid of getting a notice themselves. Robert was there, of course. He was in the back by the coffee machine. He gave me a small, apologetic smile, a what can you do kind of shrug. He was playing the part of the henpecked husband, the gentle soul married to a dragon. I knew then it was an act. No one is that patient. No one is that calm when their spouse is behaving like a lunatic. It's a mask. And I've spent my life learning to see the man behind the mask. His eyes were not apologetic. They were cold, calculating. He was watching, gauging the room, gauging me. He was the real threat. Brenda was just the noise, the distraction. She was the barking dog on a leash held by a very quiet man. After the biker incident, Elena and I sat at our kitchen table. The sun was going down. The sky was orange and purple. It was a peaceful evening, but there was no peace in our house. Not anymore. Elena had a laptop open. She's the smart one, the planner. My job was to handle the physical threats. Her job was to handle the information. She was our logistics officer, our commander. Robert Fletcher, she said, tapping on the keyboard, left Omnicorp Energy 10 years ago under murky circumstances. moved here shortly after. He was an executive vice president, specialized in land acquisition and resource development. That sounded about right. A man who spent his life taking land from people. He's the one who structured the HOA's charter, she continued. Gave it unusual authority over unincorporated land like ours. She pointed to a line on the screen, a bit of legal jargon I didn't understand. That's the hook, she said. It's a loophole. It gives the HOA the right of first refusal if a property with chronic and unresolvable violations goes up for forced sale. My blood went cold. This wasn't about property values. This was a land grab, a slow, methodical theft disguised as neighborhood rules. They weren't trying to make us comply. They were trying to make us fail. They wanted to bury us in fines and legal fees until we were forced to sell. And the HOA, run by Robert, would be waiting to scoop it up for pennies on the dollar. The bikers were in escalation, I said. The letters weren't working fast enough. They were getting impatient. Elena nodded. Robert is getting impatient. Why? That was the million-dollar question. Why our land? It was 100 acres of grass and trees. A creek ran through the back 40. It was good land, but it wasn't special. Not on the surface. My grandfather never mentioned anything valuable here, I said. He was a farmer. He saw dirt, water, and sunlight. Nothing more. The question hung in the air between us. The answer had to be on that land, or, more likely, under it. We had the who and the how. Robert was the who. The HOA was the how. Now, we needed the why. And to find it, we needed to stop looking at the letters and the rules. We needed to look at the land itself. Let's check the cameras, Elena said. We had a simple security system, a few cameras covering the house, the barn, and the front gate, mostly for watching wildlife. Or so we thought. Elena started scrolling back through the footage. Days, weeks, looking for anything out of place. For a while, it was just deer, raccoons, and the occasional delivery truck. Then she stopped. Wait, she said. Look at this. Midnight. 2 figures on our fence line with survey gear, planting markers like they own the place. Not hikers, not hunters. Trespassers. And it wasn't for a new fence. Elena saved the video file to a secure drive. She made 3 copies. One for us, one for a safe deposit box, and one she mailed to her sister in another state. Elena doesn't take chances. They were using what looks like ground-penetrating radar, she said, zooming in on the image. And that other device, it could be a magnetometer. My military training kicked in. Ground-penetrating radar sees what's under the surface, tunnels, bunkers, pipes. A magnetometer detects variations in the magnetic field. It can find large metal objects buried deep, like tanks or pipelines or drilling equipment. They weren't looking for property lines, I said. They were looking for something underneath. The next morning, before the sun came up, I went to the barn. I pulled a large, flat case from a locked cabinet. Inside was a drone, not a toy. It was a commercial-grade quadcopter with a high-resolution camera and thermal imaging. I used to use these to scout enemy positions. Today, I was scouting my own backyard. I launched it from the field behind the barn. The first 2 flights showed nothing unusual. On the 3rd pass, I flew a different grid. The drone rose silently into the pre-dawn sky, a ghost. On the controller screen, I saw my land from 100 feet up, a patchwork of green and brown. I flew it toward the back fence line where the men in the video had been. I switched to the thermal camera. The thermal washed the woods in cool blue and hot red, just enough to spot what didn't belong. Cold and hot. I was looking for anything unnatural, any heat signature that shouldn't be there. I followed the fence line slowly. Nothing. Just the cold ground and the occasional warm shape of a sleeping animal. I was about to give up when I saw it. A faint line. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, but on the thermal screen, it showed up as a slightly different temperature. A long, straight scar running through the woods just inside my property. Orange flags every 50 yards. A grid. Someone mapped my woods like a job site. It was an old trail, overgrown and forgotten, but the drone could see it. I followed the line. It led from the state forest deep into my land. It was wide enough for a large vehicle, a truck, or something bigger. I pulled at the handle. It was stuck fast, rusted shut. I went back to the barn and got a crowbar and a shovel. I dug around the edges of the hatch. It took an hour of hard work. Finally, with a loud groan of protesting metal, the hatch moved. I lifted it open. Grandpa came home a tank commander. He kept some secrets. A wave of cool, musty air washed over me. I pointed a flashlight down into the darkness. A steep metal ladder led straight down. It was a tank, but not a water tank. It was an old fuel storage tank, a massive one, buried 30 feet underground. But it was empty. I could hear my voice echo inside it. Why mark an empty tank? Not the tank. The ground under it. Robert's old company drilled oil, not water. The pieces clicked. Old surveys, quiet rumors, a deposit under my land. The tank was their landmark, their target. This was never about a suburban feud. It was about millions of dollars of black gold buried beneath my feet. The HOA, the violations, the bikers, it was all a smokescreen. A cheap, brutal way to scare me off land that he couldn't buy. He needed me gone, and he was using a bunch of neighborhood busybodies to do his dirty work. I closed the hatch. I covered it back up with dirt and leaves. I pulled up the survey markers. I erased the signs of my discovery. Robert thought he was the only one who knew the secret. Let him keep thinking that. Knowledge is power, and right now, I had all of it. He had a map, but I was standing on the treasure. He thought he was the hunter. He didn't realize he had just walked into my trap. The drone was just the beginning. Now it was time to build the cage. A cage made of laws, evidence, and his own greed. And I knew just how to bait it. The fight for Oak Ridge Meadows wasn't about my lawn anymore. It was about my legacy, and I don't give up what's mine. Robert Fletcher thought he had all the advantages. He was about to learn otherwise. Elena and I sat down that night with a new plan. Not a defensive one, an offensive one. The goal was no longer to survive. He thinks we're stupid, Elena said. She was looking at a new violation notice that had arrived in the mail. This one was about an unauthorized structure. It was the old shed where I kept my tools. It had been there for 70 years. He's escalating the paper trail, building his case for the forced sale. Good, I said. Let him. I picked up the notice. It demanded the shed be removed within 30 days, or we would face a daily fine of $500. It was signed by Brenda Fletcher, of course, but the words felt like they came from Robert. Cold, legal, final. We're going to comply, I said. Elena looked at me, confused. We're what, Cole? That shed is where you store everything. Tearing it down is exactly what they want. No, I said. They want to fight. They want us to refuse. They want to drag us to court where Robert can bury us in motions and fees. We're not going to play his game. We're going to play mine. A smile slowly spread across Elena's face. She understood. A trap, she whispered. You're going to bait the trap. Exactly, I said. I'm going to tear down that shed. I'm going to do it myself. And I'm going to make sure Robert and Brenda see me do it. The next morning, I started. I took a sledgehammer to the old, weathered wood. It was hard work. That shed was built to last, but I made sure to be visible. I worked with my shirt off. I made a show of it. I wanted the neighbors to see. I wanted them to talk. I knew Brenda's network of spies would report back to her within the hour. Sure enough, by lunchtime, a car slowed down on the road in front of our drive. A silver sedan. Brenda Fletcher's car. She didn't get out. She just sat there watching me. I could feel her eyes on me. I gave her a little wave, a friendly, neighborly wave. She sped off in a huff. The message was sent. Cole Matthews is breaking. He's giving in. By sunset, the shed was gone. Nothing but wood chips and bare earth where it had stood for 70 years. The chipper burped twice. Elena handled the next part. She drafted a letter. It was a masterpiece of fake surrender. She wrote about the stress of the violations, the desire to be a good neighbor, the hope that this act of compliance would end the dispute. She made us sound beaten, desperate for peace. She sent it via certified mail to the HOA. A receipt was required. We wanted proof they got it. Proof for later. 2 days later, Robert Fletcher himself came to our door. It was the first time he had ever come to the house. He came alone. He was dressed in golf pants and a polo shirt. He looked like any other retiree. He had a plate of cookies in his hands, a peace offering. I just wanted to say thank you, he said, his voice soft and sincere. Brenda and I, we appreciate you taking that step. We just want this all to be over. He was a good liar. He sold it smooth. I invited him in. I wanted him inside my house. I wanted him to feel comfortable, to feel like he had won. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Elena and I had planned his downfall. He put the cookies on the table. My wife bakes when she's happy, he said with a small smile. She's very happy. He slid the plate toward me. Legal costs stack fast, Cole. I'd hate to watch you drown over a fence. He smiled like it was compassion. I smiled back. Good news, I said. I can swim. We just want to live here in peace, I said. I made my voice sound tired, worn down. We don't want any more trouble. I understand, Robert said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Look, Cole, I know Brenda can be a lot. She gets carried away, but her heart is in the right place. He was trying to position himself as the good guy, the reasonable one. It was a classic tactic. Good cop, bad cop. But this isn't just about the shed, is it? He continued. This property, it's a lot to manage. He smiled. Brenda reads bylaws. I read people, he said softly. You look tired. Big financial burden. Have you ever thought about selling? There it was. The real reason for his visit, the final move in his game. He figured I was boxed in. He thought I was broken. He was moving in for the kill. We've thought about it, I said, looking down at my hands. But this land has been in my family for a long time. Of course, he said, patting my arm. But sometimes you have to think about the future. What's practical? I might know some people who would be very interested. Developers. They would pay a fair price, a very fair price. It could solve all your problems. He folded his hands. Courts make clouds, Cole. I know people at the county. Weather turns fast. He smiled like a pastor. I smiled like a storm. Forecast says clear. I said, bring an umbrella. He blinked, just once. The mask slipped, then snapped back on. He was offering me a way out that would lead directly into his pocket. He thought he was dangling a carrot. He didn't realize he was stepping into a snare. I looked up at him. I let him see the fake conflict in my eyes, the struggle. I'll have to talk to my wife, I said. It's a big decision. Of course, he said, standing up. You do that. Just know there are options, friendly options. He walked to the door. He was confident, smug. He had played his hand perfectly, or so he thought. As he stepped onto the porch, he paused. He looked out at my field, at the land he wanted so badly. It's a beautiful piece of property, he said. It would be a shame to see it get tied up in legal battles for years. It was a threat, a velvet-gloved threat. The final turn of the screw. He got in his car and drove away. He didn't know that a tiny camera hidden in a planter on the porch had recorded our entire conversation. He didn't know that the cookie plate he left behind would be dusted by deputies for fingerprints. He thought he was closing the trap on me. In reality, he had just armed the trigger on his own. He had confirmed his intent. And now he felt safe. He felt like he was in control. And a man who feels safe is a man who makes mistakes. I knew he would make another one, a bigger one, and I would be ready. The fake surrender was complete. Now it was time to prepare for the real war. Robert's visit was the signal. He believed we were weak. He believed we were ready to break. In my world, when your enemy thinks you are weak, that is when they are most likely to overcommit, to make a fatal error. Robert thought the next step was a checkbook. He thought he could buy his way to victory. He misjudged me. He misjudged my wife. We were preparing for an assault. Elena set up a new command center in our basement. After last year, the doctor said, take it easy. She stayed on comms and maps. The old root cellar made a perfect holding area. Solid stone walls, one way in. She had multiple monitors, maps of the property, and a secure communications link. She looked like she was running a forward operating base, because she was. They'll try something physical again, she said. The bikers were a test. It failed. Robert is not a man who accepts failure. He'll escalate. I agreed. The legal route was too slow. He was impatient. That was his weakness. Greed makes men impatient. He'll hire a better class of thug this time, I said. Not bikers looking for a quick payday. He'll hire professionals, men who know how to do this kind of work. I spent the next 2 days hardening the property. I wasn't just preparing for a break-in. I was preparing for a siege. I reinforced the doors and windows. Most importantly, I finished wiring Elena's design, steel plates we installed last fall that could seal the house in seconds. I set up motion-activated floodlights covering all approaches to the house. I placed tripwires in the woods, not connected to anything explosive, but to a silent alarm that would ping Elena's computer. I walked the perimeter again and again. I knew every tree, every rock, every dip in the ground. This was my home turf, my battlefield. I had fought in deserts and jungles and mountains. I had fought in cities I couldn't pronounce. This was different. This was personal. This was for Elena, for the peace we had tried to build. The core question always comes down to one thing. How far will a man go to defend his own? I didn't have to look far for the answer. As far as it takes. There is no line. Not when they come for your home. Not when they threaten your family. The law was a tool, but it was a slow one. Justice could come later. Tonight, survival came first. Elena and I had a quiet dinner. We didn't talk much. We knew what was coming. After dinner, she went down to the basement. I stayed on the main floor. I sat in a dark living room, looking out the window. The moon was a sliver in the sky. A good night for bad things. At 1:17 a.m., it began. The first tripwire went off. A silent notification on Elena's screen. Movement, she said into the small earpiece I was wearing. Her voice was perfectly calm. West perimeter, near the old oak tree. For individuals. I moved to the west-facing window. I didn't turn on a light. I used a pair of night vision goggles. I saw them. For men dressed in black. They moved like soldiers. Quiet, disciplined. They carried heavy bags. They weren't here to talk. They're heading for the main transformer. I whispered into my mic. They're going to cut the power. Expected, Elena replied. Backup generator is ready. The lockdown system is on a separate battery. The lockdown system was Elena's project, steel plates that would slide down over the windows and doors, an idea she got from a documentary about hurricane-proof houses. She had adapted it for a different kind of storm. A minute later, the lights in the house flickered and died. The hum of the refrigerator went silent. The world outside was plunged into total darkness. But inside, a low hum started, the backup generator kicking in. Red emergency lights turned on along the hallways. On Elena's screens, everything was still lit up. The cameras, the sensors, everything. They thought they had blinded us. They had only turned on our real eyes. They're moving toward the house, Elena said. 2 from the front, 2 from the back. I watched the 2 men in the front approach the porch. They were carrying pry bars and a small battering ram. They were not subtle. They expected soft locks, not steel and alarms. This was a smash and grab, designed to terrify, to overwhelm. They thought they were hitting a soft target, a farmer and his wife. They thought we would be hiding under a bed, waiting for it to be over. They reached the front door. Lockdown, I said. Engaging now, Elena's voice came back. A loud thud echoed through the house as the first steel plate slammed down over the living room window. Then another, and another. A series of heavy, final sounds. The men on the porch froze. They looked up as a thick sheet of steel slid down over the front door. They were locked out, and we were locked in. One of them slammed the battering ram against the steel door. It made a dull clang. He might as well have been hitting a mountain. They were trapped outside with me. They started shouting, confused, angry. Their plan had just fallen apart. The 2 men at the back were having the same problem. Every window, every door was now a solid wall of steel. They were trying to break into a fortress, and the fortress was about to fight back. Through my earpiece, I heard Elena's calm voice. All entry points secure. The perimeter is yours, Cole. I went to the back door. I pressed a button on the wall. The steel plate slid silently upwards. I stepped out into the darkness. The 2 men at the back were trying to pry open the kitchen window. Their backs were to me. I moved across the lawn without a sound. This was my element. The dark, the quiet, the moment before the storm breaks. They never heard me coming. They had tried to break down my door. They thought they were the predators. They had no idea they were the prey. The first man went down without a sound. His partner's elbow caught my ribs as he spun. I felt something crack, but adrenaline kept me moving. A hard strike to the base of the skull. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. His partner turned, his eyes wide in the faint moonlight. He opened his mouth to shout. He was too late. I was already there. This was not a negotiation. This was a response. And the response was just beginning. The fight was short. It wasn't a fight. It was an extraction. The 2 men at the back of the house were down in seconds. One unconscious, the other with a dislocated shoulder, gasping on the ground. I left them there and moved around the side of the house. The 2 at the front were still trying to figure out what to do. They had given up on the steel-plated door and were examining the windows, looking for a weak point. There were none. Rico, answer me. What's happening back there? One of them hissed into a radio. No answer. He was getting nervous. His partner was jumpy, spinning around at every sound the night made. They were professionals, but their plan was shot. They were operating blind. I was not. From the basement, Elena was my eyes. They're separating, she said in my ear. One is moving to the east corner of the house. The other is staying on the porch. Perfect. Divide and conquer. It's the oldest rule in the book. I stalked the man moving to the east corner. He was trying to be quiet, but he was making too much noise. His gear was rattling. His boots were crunching on the gravel path, not used to the absolute silence. He stopped near a large rose bush Elena was so proud of. He knelt, trying to get a different angle on the house. I came up behind him, using the bush as cover. He never knew I was there. A quick, precise motion, and he was on the ground, his radio clattering on the stones. That left one, the leader. He was still on the porch, getting more and more agitated. Report, he kept saying into his radio. All teams, report now. Only static answered him. He knew. He had to know. He was alone. He pulled a gun, a pistol with a suppressor. So, they were willing to kill. That raised the stakes, but it didn't change the outcome. I didn't go to the porch. That's what he would expect. I went back inside through the rear door, sealing it behind me. I moved through the dark house to the front. I stood on the other side of the steel-plated door. I could hear his ragged breathing. He was terrified. He was the last man standing, and he was trapped on my porch. "They're all down, Cole," Elena said. "Just the one left." "I know," I whispered. I pressed the button to open the front door. The steel plate slid up with a low hum. The man stepped into the dark. He listened. I let the house talk for me. Old wood, a ticking clock. My breath slow and quiet. A shard of glass cracked under his boot. He flinched, swung left. I moved right. My rib lit up hot, but I kept moving. "Who's there?" he whispered. The silence answered first. The man spun around, gun raised. He was facing an empty, dark doorway. I wasn't there. I was to the side, in the shadows of the hall. He took a hesitant step inside. "Big mistake. Your house, your rules." "My house, my rules." I slammed the door shut behind him and hit the lockdown button again. The steel plate crashed down. Now he was locked inside with me, in the dark. He panicked. He fired his gun wildly into the living room. The suppressed shots were quiet little coughs. Muzzle flashes lit up the room for a split second at a time. I saw him clearly. He was just a man in the dark, scared and out of his depth. I let him empty his clip. When the shooting stopped, the silence was deafening. He was breathing hard, trying to listen. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice trembled. I didn't answer. I let the silence be his enemy. I moved silently to the other side of the room. He was a statue, frozen in fear. I could have taken him down from 10 feet away, but I wanted something. I stepped into the faint red glow of an emergency light. I let him see me. He raised his empty gun, his hand shaking. "Who are you?" he gasped. "I'm the homeowner," I said. My voice was calm. It seemed to scare him more than shouting would have. I took a step toward him. He took a step back. He bumped into a table. A lamp crashed to the floor. "Stay back," he yelled. "Robert will pay for this. Robert will kill you." He said the name. Robert. That's what I wanted. Confirmation. Not from a low-level biker, from the leader of a professional team. Elena was recording everything. The audio was crystal clear. Time-stamped. Mirrored to the cloud. Chain of custody clean. "Robert Fletcher sent you?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Yes." "Now let me go," he pleaded. He had dropped the tough guy act completely. He was just a frightened man who had taken a job that went very, very wrong. I had him. I had the proof. I needed the direct link from this violent home invasion back to Robert. But getting the proof wasn't enough. This couldn't just be about the law. This was about a message. A message to Robert. I took one more step. He was cornered. There was nowhere left for him to run. I looked at this man, this tool sent by a greedy coward to terrorize my family. And I knew that justice wasn't just about winning in court. It was about making sure this never, ever happened again. I raised my hand. He flinched, shielding his face. He was expecting a blow. I simply took the empty gun from his trembling grasp. Pain flared under my ribs. I kept moving. "It's over," I said. I walked him to the basement door and locked him in a storage room. Dispatch had our call already. Units en route. Deputies took custody within the hour, along with his 3 friends outside who were being zip-tied and tended to by Elena, who had come up from her command center, first aid kit in hand. She was an EMT again, patching up the very men who had come to harm us. That's Elena. She saves people. I just stopped the ones who need stopping. The assault was over. The property was secure. We had the attackers. We had the confession. We had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. Now we had to go after the general. While I was dealing with Robert's hired guns, something else was happening. Something we never could have planned. Our neighbor, Mark, lived in the house closest to us in the subdivision. He was a quiet guy, a retired accountant. We'd wave when we drove by. That was about it. His son, Ethan, was a different story. He was 16, pale, skinny, and he never seemed to go outside. He lived on his computer. His parents worried about him. They thought he was just playing video games all day. They were wrong. Ethan was a hacker, not a malicious one. He was just curious. He liked puzzles. He liked to see how things worked. And for months, he had been watching the HOA, run by Brenda Fletcher, make life miserable for everyone in the neighborhood, including his own parents. They had received a violation for having a basketball hoop that was, according to Brenda, aesthetically displeasing. Ethan hated Brenda Fletcher. He hated the HOA, so he decided to look into it. He started with their website. It was a simple, poorly designed site. Child's play for him. Within an hour, he was inside their server. He was just poking around, looking at the meeting minutes, the budget reports. He was looking for hypocrisy. He found something much worse. The night of the assault on our house, Ethan was awake. He was deep inside the HOA's digital files. He found a hidden folder. It was password protected, but the password was OmniCorp1, Robert's old company. Robert was getting sloppy. Inside the folder, Ethan found the real HOA, the one that operated in the shadows. There were spreadsheets, lists of properties, and detailed notes. He found our property file. It was huge. It contained copies of every violation notice they had sent us. But it also contained other documents, drafts of legal filings, internal emails between Robert and a lawyer in the city, emails discussing strategies to encourage the Matthews to relinquish the property. But then he found the jackpot. He found a subfolder labeled Acquisition. Inside was a set of forged documents, a fake land survey showing our property lines drawn incorrectly, making it seem like our barn was on community land, a forged geological report stating that the land was unstable and unsuitable for residential use, and the crown jewel, a draft of a sale agreement. It was a contract to sell our land from the HOA to a shell company called Meadowlands Development Group. The price was $1. Ethan stared at the screen. He knew this was big. This was a crime. He downloaded everything, every file, every email. He copied it to a secure thumb drive. He called the sheriff from his dad's phone and told them what he found. As he was finishing, he saw a new file being uploaded to the server in real time. It was an audio file. He clicked on it. He heard a man's terrified voice. Robert will pay for this. Robert will kill you. Then another, calmer voice. Robert Fletcher sent you? Yes. Now let me go. Ethan's blood ran cold. He was listening to the confession I was extracting from the raid leader in my living room. Elena, from her command center, had not only been recording, she had been live uploading the audio to a secure cloud Cerberus server that Ethan, by sheer coincidence, had also found his way into. He suddenly understood the yelling he'd heard faintly in the distance an hour ago. The power outage. It wasn't just about letters and fines anymore. The Matthews were in real trouble. He grabbed the thumb drive. He ran out of his room, down the stairs, and out his front door. He ran across the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Meadows, straight to our driveway. He saw the sheriff's cars that had just arrived. He saw me talking to a deputy on the porch. He saw Elena directing paramedics to the men I had taken down. Ethan ran up to me, out of breath, holding the small thumb drive in his hand like it was a holy relic. Mr. Matthews, he gasped. I have something you need to see. He was just a kid I'd never spoken more than 2 words to, and he had just handed me the key to everything. The paper trail, the motive, the conspiracy, all laid out in neat digital files. I had the physical evidence of the attack, the confession linking it to Robert. Now, thanks to a bored, brilliant teenager who hated his HOA, I had the documents, the fraud, the whole rotten scheme. Robert's plan was a house of cards, and Ethan had just handed me the one card that would bring it all crashing down. I took the thumb drive from him. Thank you, Ethan, I said. You did a good thing here. He just nodded, still trying to catch his breath. He looked around at the scene, the deputies, the subdued attackers, the steel-plated windows. He looked at me. For the first time, he didn't look like a shy kid. He looked like a soldier who had just completed his mission. We had our weapons. We had our ammunition. The final battle wasn't going to be fought in the dark. It was going to be fought in the light, in public, and we were going to end it. The next week was quiet, too quiet. Robert and Brenda Fletcher laid low. No new violation notices, no angry phone calls. They were waiting. They didn't know we had their men. The sheriff's department had taken them into custody on trespassing and assault charges, but we'd asked them to keep it quiet. They were being held as material witnesses. Robert probably assumed his team had failed and run off. He didn't know we had the thumb drive. He thought he was still in control. His arrogance was his greatest weakness. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. It was the biggest event of the year in Oak Ridge Meadows. It was Brenda's coronation, the day she would unveil her plans for the community, levy new fees, and publicly shame anyone who had dared to cross her. This year, the main event was supposed to be the public condemnation of the Matthews, the final vote to authorize legal action and force the sale of our property. It was all laid out in the documents Ethan had found. Robert and Brenda thought this meeting was their victory lap. We decided to make it their execution. Elena and I worked with Ethan and the sheriff's department. We built our case. It was airtight. We had the video of the surveyors, the audio of Robert's visit where he'd offered to buy the land. We had the 4 attackers, who had all given sworn statements against Robert. And we had Ethan's thumb drive with the forged documents and the shell company contract. It was a mountain of evidence. Elena, the master planner, put it all together. She edited the videos and audio clips into a single, devastating presentation, a montage of greed and crime. She timed it down to the second. The sheriff had plainclothes deputies ready. They would be in the audience. Warrants for the arrest of Robert and Brenda Fletcher were signed and waiting. All we had to do was light the fuse. The day of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. My hands were sweating as I checked the remote one last time. Every breath pinched. The ribs still hurt. If the tech failed now, Robert would walk free. Every seat was filled. The air was tense. People were afraid of Brenda, but they were also tired of her. They were tired of the petty tyranny. They were ready for a change. Brenda and Robert were at the front table. Brenda was beaming, soaking in the attention. Robert was in his usual spot, the quiet, supportive husband. He gave me a small, condescending nod as I walked in. He thought I was there to beg, to plead my case. He had no idea I was there to burn his world to the ground. Brenda started the meeting. She went through the usual business, the budget, the landscaping committee report. Then she got to the main event. New business, she announced, her voice dripping with fake solemnity. The matter of the Matthews property. A picture of our farmhouse flashed up on the big screen behind her. This board has shown incredible patience, she began, her voice rising. We have sent notices. We have issued warnings. We have tried to reason with them, but the Matthews have refused to comply. They have ignored our rules. They have brought down the value and the dignity of our entire community. She was on a roll. She paced back and forth, gesturing at the screen. She pointed at Mr. Garcia in the front row. And your wheelchair ramp is 2 inches over code. Gasps rolled through the room. Someone whispered, she fined a wheelchair ramp last month. And their continued defiance is a slap in the face to every law-abiding homeowner here. She paused for dramatic effect. Therefore, this board proposes a motion to pursue all legal avenues to seize and sell the property, as is our right under the HOA charter. A few of Brenda's cronies started to applaud. Most people just sat in silence. They looked uncomfortable. This felt different. It felt wrong. Robert was watching the crowd, his face a mask of calm concern. He was the puppet master watching his creation perform. Is there any discussion? Brenda asked, a smug smile on her face. From the back, Marty looked around. No one moved. I stood up. I have something to say, I said. My voice cut through the room. Every head turned toward me. Brenda's smile faltered. You are out of order, Mr. Matthews, she snapped. This is not your time to speak. I think it is, I said. I walked to the front of the room. I was holding a remote control, the one for Elena's presentation. Robert's eyes narrowed. He was starting to sense that something was wrong. The plan was going off script. You've all heard Brenda's story, I said to the crowd. Now I'd like to show you another one. Before Brenda could object, I pressed the button. The picture of my farmhouse on the screen behind her vanished. It was replaced by grainy night vision footage. The 2 surveyors on my land. The room went silent. I could hear people gasping. Then came the footage from the drone, the hidden tank trail, the survey markers. Then the audio from Robert's visit, his voice smooth and friendly, offering to buy my land to solve my problems. People started murmuring. They were looking at Robert. His mask was starting to crack. He was pale. Then came the finale. The screen went black, and the audio from the night of the assault began to play. The leader's panicked voice. Robert will pay for this. Robert will kill you. The entire room held its breath. Then my voice. Robert Fletcher sent you? And the final, damning answer. Yes. Slide. HOA reserve account. Consulting payments to Meadowlands. $142,600 missing. A hush fell. Someone whispered. That's the pool money. The room erupted. People were shouting, pointing at Robert. He looked like a cornered animal. Brenda was speechless, her face white with shock. She looked at her husband, her eyes full of confusion and horror. She was just a bully. She had no idea she was a pawn in a multi-million-dollar criminal conspiracy. The final piece of evidence flashed on the screen. The sale agreement from the HOA to Robert's shell company for $1. That was it. The whole ugly story laid bare for everyone to see. As the shouting reached a crescendo, the doors to the clubhouse opened. The sheriff walked in, followed by 4 uniformed deputies. He held up the warrants. Robert Fletcher, he said, his voice booming over the chaos. You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and aggravated assault. 2 deputies moved toward Robert. He didn't resist. He just sat there, staring at the screen. Defeated. Brenda Fletcher, the sheriff continued. You are under arrest for conspiracy and fraud. Brenda started to sob. I didn't know, she cried. I didn't know anything about this. But it was too late. The deputies led them both out in handcuffs. The crowd parted to let them pass. No one said a word. They just watched. The reign of the Fletchers was over. Not with a whimper, but with a bang. Just as we had planned. The aftermath was messy. After the arrests dissolved the HOA, the county unsealed the survey, and the local paper broke the oil story. A big energy company, a competitor of Omnicorp, came calling. They showed up at my door in a black SUV. A man in a slick suit offered me a check with a staggering number of zeros on it, enough money to never have to think about money again. He had charts and graphs. He talked about production schedules and royalty payments. He saw my land as a resource to be extracted, a number on a balance sheet. We listened to his pitch, asked questions about environmental impact and community benefits. After an hour of discussion, I looked at him. "We're not interested in extraction rights," I said. He was stunned. "But Mr. Matthews, this is a life-changing amount of money." "My life is fine," I said. "The land is not for sale." He couldn't understand it. To him, everything had a price. He didn't get that some things are worth more than money. This land wasn't just dirt and oil. It was my grandfather's legacy. It was the place Elena and I had chosen to build our peace. We had fought for it. We weren't going to sell it to the first person with a big checkbook. We had a different plan. A few months later, construction began. Not on an oil rig, on a different kind of facility. We used some of our savings and got a grant from a veterans foundation. We built a retreat, a center for combat veterans to come and find their own peace, a place for them to decompress, to learn new skills, to just be quiet. We used the old barn as a workshop. We built cabins in the woods. We cleared the old tank trail my grandfather had made, turning it into a hiking path. The underground fuel tank, the one that started it all. We cleaned it out and turned it into a root cellar for a massive vegetable garden. We were taking something built for war and turning it into something that healed. Robert Fletcher was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His greed had consumed him. Brenda, it turned out, really was mostly in the dark about the oil. She was a willing accomplice in the harassment, but she wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was just a sad, power-hungry woman. She got 5 years probation and a court order to never serve on any board or committee ever again. For her, that was a fate worse than jail. The residents of Oak Ridge Meadows formed a new HOA, a voluntary one. Their first order of business was to draft a formal apology to us. Their second was to offer Ethan a full college scholarship for his services to the community. The kid was a local hero. He even started coming outside more. He'd come over to our place sometimes and help me with the computer systems for the Veterans Center. He'd found his purpose. We all had. One evening, Elena and I were sitting on our porch, the same porch where the bikers had threatened her. The sun was setting. A group of veterans were down by the creek, fishing. The sound of their quiet laughter carried on the breeze. It was a good sound. It was the sound of peace. The right kind of peace, the kind you earn. "We did a good thing here, Cole," Elena said, leaning her head on my shoulder. I looked out at the land, at the new buildings, at the lives that were being put back together here. How far will a man go to defend his own? That was the question that started all this. And the answer was clear. You go as far as you have to. And when the fight is over, you don't just rebuild what was broken. You build something better. A new gate stood at the end of our long driveway. It was made of solid steel. On it was a simple wooden sign, Tanner Veterans Retreat, private property. We had a new arrangement with the new HOA. They had no authority over our land. We were officially, legally, and forever separate. We were our own island, our own quiet kingdom. Sometimes a car from the subdivision would slow down as it passed our gate. The people inside would look up the drive toward the house, toward the retreat. They weren't looking with anger or suspicion anymore. They were just looking, maybe wondering what it was like to fight for something and win. To turn a battlefield into a sanctuary. I don't know what they thought, and I didn't care. My world was here, inside this gate, with my wife, with the men and women who had served. Elena placed my hand on her belly and smiled. "Cole," she whispered, "we're pregnant. Our first child will be born here." I reached over and took Elena's hand. "New house rule," she said, laughing. "No more biker visits after bedtime." The fight was over. We were home, and I closed the gate for good.